For 11 hours, an office full of people who had already gone home continued sending emails to a man who was alone in the building. The man's name was Dariusz Wollenbeck, a compliance analyst at a mid-sized logistics firm on the fourth floor of a building on Kessler Row. He arrived at 7:40 each morning, the same as always, carrying the same steel travel mug and the same laminated badge. That particular Thursday was overcast, the kind of grey that makes fluorescent lighting feel warm by comparison. He noticed the parking lot first, 11 cars where there were normally close to 90. His first thought was a fire drill. His second was a water main. Neither explained why the front doors were already unlocked at that hour or why the lobby was dark except for the emergency strips along the floor. He checked his phone. No alerts, no closure notice. The company's internal messaging system loaded normally, showing his colleagues' names in green marked active. He decided the building was simply understaffed, that maybe he had missed a memo, and that his audit deadline would not wait for an explanation. So, he worked. For most of the morning, nothing seemed wrong. Emails arrived, a co-worker in accounts payable pinged him about a vendor form. Automated calendar reminders surfaced on schedule. He answered everything. He later described the morning as boring in a way that felt slightly rehearsed, though he could not say why. At 2 o'clock exactly, he heard the sound. It came from the far end of the hallway near the restrooms. A dry, rhythmic rasp, like a person coughing, except the intervals were too even. Cough. Silence. Cough. Silence. Each gap identical. He assumed a pipe or a failing air handler and ignored it for several minutes. When it did not stop, he walked down to check. The restroom was empty. All 4 stalls stood open. The sound continued, but it was not coming from the room. It was coming from behind the wall. He followed it to a maintenance closet, locked with a keypad he had never noticed in 3 years of walking past it. The rasping was clearest there, resonating through a vent grill near the ceiling. He pried the door using a letter opener and a fire extinguisher bracket, which he was later almost apologetic about. Inside, mounted to an old ventilation shaft, was a small speaker. Below it, resting in the base of the shaft where warm air had collected decades of dust, was a collection of objects, wallets, wristwatches, a dozen employee badges, several phones, most of them models that had not been sold in years. He recognized 2 of the badges. One belonged to a woman in payroll he saw every week. The other belonged to a man who had retired before Wollenbeck was hired, whose face he knew only from a framed service award photo in the break room. The coughing continued from the speaker above the pile. He tried calling building security. The line rang and rang. He tried the front desk extension. Nothing. It was somewhere in this stretch of the afternoon that he thought to look at his own inbox more carefully. The messages he had answered all morning. The vendor request. The calendar invites. 3 of the sender accounts belonged to people who no longer worked there. One had left in 2019. Another, according to the retirement date printed under the break room photo, had been gone for more than a decade. Their accounts had sent him messages throughout the previous night, time-stamped at intervals as precise as that cough. One arrived at 3:14 in the morning, another at 4:07. He decided to leave. The lobby doors would not open. The magnetic locks had engaged, which they were not supposed to do during business hours. Through the glass in the grey daylight, he counted them. People. Standing in the parking lot. Not moving. He estimated more than 30. They faced the building. He recognized a few of the faces the way you recognize someone from an old photograph, and it took him a moment to place why. They matched portraits in the company's archived employee directory, the printed one from before the digital system, the one kept in a binder near the copier. People who had left. People who, in at least 2 cases, he was fairly sure had died. He did not scream. He walked quickly to the stairwell fire exit on the east side and pushed through into the alley, setting off an alarm that, he noted later, did not seem to be connected to anything. He called the police from the sidewalk on Kessler Row. When 2 officers arrived, roughly 19 minutes later, the parking lot held only the 11 cars from the morning. No one stood outside. The building was empty. Every stall in the restroom was as he had left it. The maintenance closet became the actual case. The ventilation speaker was old, wired into a system a contractor eventually traced to an undocumented installation from the early 1980s, described in one salvage work order as an occupancy signal. Nobody currently employed by the building or the company could explain what it was for, why it played at 2 o'clock, or who maintained it. The personal objects were catalogued and mostly went unclaimed. But the detail that closed the file to further public discussion was smaller than any of that. Mounted beside the decades-old speaker was a second device, a microphone, clean, Recently installed, still bearing a strip of factory film on its housing, its cable did not connect to the old system. It ran along the shaft through the wall and terminated in the ceiling directly above Darius Vollenbeck's desk. It had been recording all day. The last file on it was 2 hours long. It contained the sound of a man working alone, typing, sighing, muttering to himself. And beneath that, faint and constant from the beginning of the recording, hours before he ever walked down the hall, was the sound of someone quietly coughing.